Hello, everyone, and welcome to our lesson 3-4. In this one, we're talking about different types of economic systems. We're going to compare and we're going to contrast those different type of economic systems. So let's get started with talking about what economics is. Well, economics is the study of how individuals and societies make decisions about resources, production, distribution, exchange, and consumptions of goods and services, giving unlimited and competing wants and given the scarcity of those resources. Okay, we all have unlimited and competing wants, but there's a scarcity of all of these different types of resources. So economics is the study of how individuals and societies make decisions about those things. Now, in an economy and in societies, there's three basic questions that all these societies need to answer. First question is for whom? For whom is it being produced? Second is how? How should it be produced? And third is what should be produced. So, for whom is it being produced? How should it be produced? And what should be produced? So an economic system then is what governments and societies use to make decisions about those resources, production, and distribution of those goods and services. So what are the functional elements that all economic systems have in common? Well, first, you've got consumers. They create the demand for the goods and services. Next is the government. This regulates businesses and it makes and enforces all of the laws. There is an exchange. Consumers buy the products in markets using some medium of exchange, usually a currency, money. Production. Producers create the supply of the goods that the consumers buy, that they demand. Resources. These are all the components needed for production, including natural resources, labor resources, capital goods, expertise. Well, why is an economic system needed? Well, there's basically two things. There's something called scarcity and you have mutual dependency. So scarcity is the reality that people's wants always exceed the resources available, okay? Wants are higher than the resources available to fulfill those wants. Continuing on with society, because of scarcity, societies have to make choices about how to distribute those limited resources that aren't plentiful enough to meet the total demand. Mutual dependence. What does this mean? Well, mutual dependence is when everyone relies on each other. Think the old song, we're all in this together. Da, da, da. Okay, anyway, you don't want to hear me sing right now. Why do we depend on one another? Well, so let's think about this. Sarah is good at hunting, but she might be bad at fishing. Dwayne is great at fishing, but he doesn't live near any fertile soil where you can do planting or farming. Now, Elsa, on the other hand, is a great farmer, rich soil, but she's a bad hunter. So each person in this above example, they all have something of value that they can offer to others. And through trading, they can take care of their needs and other people's needs. Here's a more modern example. Okay, Jose owns a business that sells and repairs computers, but he isn't any good at marketing his company. Okay, he doesn't know how to promote his business. On the other hand, Asala is excellent with social media marketing, but doesn't know how to fix her computer. So what happens then is Jose can buy some marketing services from Asala, and Asala can take that profit to get her computer repaired by Jose. See, they help each other out. Jose sees growth in his business due to the improved communication with his target marketing through the advertising efforts that Asala has done for him. And then Jose uses part of those profits to pay for more marketing services from Asala. So again, we rely on each other. Scarcity and mutual dependence requires us to be creative and resourceful to solve these conditions. We as humans, we try to create some kind of symbiotic relationship in order to enjoy a quality of life and for survival. Well, why, why does scarcity exist given that there are so many resources on Earth? And if plenty of resources exist, why does poverty exist? What about the people who can't or won't contribute to any labor or production? Well, let's talk about the answer to that last question. What about the people who can't or won't contribute any labor or production? Societies and governments must answer all of those questions. The world indeed has plenty of resources and plenty of production and distribution capacity. Okay, there's the resources that are out there, and we have the capacity to produce and distribute all these different products. But it always comes back to for whom is it being produced, how should it be produced, and what should be produced. So there's some major types of economic systems in the world. These are essentially the four right here, okay? Okay, remember, each of these systems must answer the what, the how, and the for whom. So let's talk about each of these economic systems. We're going to start with traditional economic system. This relies on cultural customs, history, ancestral traditions, and the time-honored beliefs to make decisions about production and distribution. These type of societies rely primarily on things like farming, fishing, hunting, gathering, and bartering. They share and trade the goods among each other through that bartering system instead of using money. And these traditional economies can be found in some parts of the world in developing countries. Think the Australian Aborigines or the Amazon tribes. Now, also in a traditional economist tradition, okay, we got to remember these are our three questions, right? What, how, and for whom, okay? Well, on the what side, these items produce and are decided based on the cultural customs and ancestral traditions. Skills necessary to produce the goods, such as farming, hunting, fishing, are passed down through the generations. That's how it should be produced. And for whom, people consume what they need and share to trade the remainder with others in the community. Next, let's talk about a centrally planned economic system. This is essentially run by the dominant centralized authority that allocates the resources, decides who makes the goods and services, how and where they're distributed, and sets the prices. And when we talk about a dominant centralized authority, this is usually the government. So in centrally planned economic systems, the production of the goods and services is usually done by government-owned economies. Communism and socialism are both forms or essentially planned systems. So let's talk about each of these. Okay, so communism is an economic and a totalitarian political system where there is no privately owned company. The government owns and controls the production, the distribution of goods and services. There's no classes. People share equally from the benefits of the labor. China, North Korea, Cuba, these are examples of communist countries. On the other hand, socialism is an economic and political system that emphasizes economic equality and collective or public ownership of production. Some examples of socialist countries are Denmark, Canada, Sweden, Finland, and Norway. Socialism, let's look at the what, the how, and the for whom for socialism. So the what is that individuals can own property, but production capacity is communally owned. Production is managed and planned by the democratically elected government. People can choose where they want to work. Production then is distributed according to individual contribution, and production is intended to meet the needs of individuals and society as a whole, with a bias toward equal distribution. Everybody gets the same amount. Okay, next is a market economic system. This is an economic system where the production, wages, prices are determined through the application of the laws of supply and demand. Got another lesson talking about supply and demand. Usually in a market economic system, there's little to no government regulation. It's also called a free market system or private enterprise. So in a market economic system, there really isn't a country that relies on a pure market economic system. The United States in itself even would consider itself to operate under a form of a market economic system called capitalism. Okay, so let's talk about capitalism. Capitalism is an economic system where companies are privately owned versus by the government, and it assumes those companies are built with the purpose of creating economic value through innovation. They're often driven by profit, and prices are set by the market via the ebb and flow of supply and demand. Let's talk a little bit more about capitalism. Now, while the USA has deep roots in capitalism, the government is also involved because the government makes laws that protect consumers and the environment and creates restrictions on certain business practices. Government also regulates those what's considered essential goods and services to ensure the safety and the well-being of citizens. Some examples of these essential things are things like energy, utilities, the electric grid, transportation, communication, water, and emergency services. Capitalism. Let's look at our three questions: what, how, and for whom. So, on the what side, private producers decide what to produce, that's the supply, based on the demand from customers and with a profit motive. Price also affects the demand for products. How? Producers compete to make the best and the lowest cost products by being innovative and efficient with their resources. And for whom? Well, people have varying incomes and they can make purchases based on what their individual buying abilities allow. All right, now let's get into the last thing, which is a mixed economic system. This is an economic system that is a blend of both capitalism and socialism. For example, Great Britain, Germany, and France. In a mixed economic system, many economic freedoms exist, like private ownership of land and the ability to deploy capital to start your own business. Mixed economy systems. Now, prices are largely set again by supply and demand of the marketplace, but the government is also involved in regulating those businesses. Government also taxes higher earners at higher tax rates in order to redistribute wealth to those who are in need through various social programs. So, kind of the US has a little bit of a mixed economic system as well. So, again, think more dollars equals more taxes. All right, so that's essentially our lesson 3-4. We talked about the differences, we compared and contrasted the four different types of economic systems. Remember, there's a traditional, there is a market, there is a central, and then there is a mixed economic system.